I'm very glad that on my second energy union tour in Greece I could participate in EU Arab Summit. I think it was a great idea of the Greek President and the Greek Prime Minister to convene the European Union and our Arab neighbors, because there is a lot we have to solve together. There is a lot of opportunities we work on together. And I saw that also in the field for which I'm responsible, energy and climate policies, how we are shifting our cooperation from that area of hydrocarbons more into modern technologies, more into renewables and the clean tech. And therefore I'm absolutely convinced that this Mediterranean basin, which is ours and which we have to manage jointly, will become very important bridge of cooperation. And I'm very glad that Greece came up with that initiative. And as I told to the Prime Minister this morning, after you did it twice, when you do it third time, it becomes the tradition, and then you have to organize it every year. So I believe that we just set up a new tradition where the EU and the Arab leaders will meet.
If I go back in 2015, let me go back. It was the first time I think that the European Commission set an agenda, a framework of resilient energy union towards more climate-friendly policies, a climate change policy. The goal was, if I'm not wrong, a fundamental transformation of the Europe's energy system. It was outlined there. What has been achieved in principles since then, and what hasn't been achieved.
So we've been really following very closely our action plan, which was part of that strategy when we presented it. And I'm glad to say that by now we accomplished, I would say, 95% of it, meaning that yesterday we presented the last big package, which was now focused on the clean mobility, meaning how to get the clean cars and a proper charging infrastructure in Europe. And it goes very much together with that clean energy package we adopted the last year. Because we want to make sure that Europe would have the clean energy and we would use it for powering the clean cars. We expect that by 2030, more than 70% of the electricity in Europe will be generated by renewables, so it will be clean. And by then, I believe that we will have also strong penetration of the clean vehicles, the zero emission or low emission vehicles, which would be powered by this clean energy. But we did also a lot in the questions which are very important for Greece and for Central and Eastern Europe, especially in the field of security of supply of gas. We are improving security of supply of electricity and making sure that the single market for energy will be finally completed, that we would remove all the obstacles, all the barriers we had in between of our countries, because this would be really to the benefit of the consumers across the Europe.
Regarding the emissions, you refer to them, it seems that the Commission initiative is to implement a limit on subsidiaries for power plants connected to a limit. Some member states, Poland, even Greece, are closely related to coal. So how is it to find a common ground on these issues with some member states that seem reluctant towards this direction?
I mean, this morning I think we adopted another landmark decision, the reform of the emission trading scheme, which is and we have to remind our citizens that this is actually the biggest scheme in the world, and which is the tool by which we are really tackling the climate change and reducing the CO2 emissions in Europe. And I think that we struck a very good compromise yesterday, meaning that we are introducing the measures which would bring the carbon price closer to the market value and to the real cost caused by carbon emissions. And at the same time, we've been also promoting the new technologies to help the new member states, but also Greece, to reform and bring the new technologies. For the new member states, this was mostly in the form of so-called innovation and modernization fund. And for Greece, there was a special measure adopted which would help to decarbonize the islands. And I think this is also such a show of solidarity, where also under these schemes we are really creating the conditions that each country would contribute according to their means, and different energy mixes are respected. But what is also true, we do not want to invest the allowances into the outdated old technologies, because what we need in Europe is to modernize. We need to have less polluting technologies, and this goes hand in hand with our commitments we have undertaken in the Paris Agreement.
President Trump announced the withdrawal from the Paris climate deal. Do you think that the EU could successfully take the lead in this, be a political game changer?
I think we are already doing that, and I saw it when I was on the Clean Energy and Emission Innovation Ministerial meeting in Beijing, where it was very clear that the leadership in this field is now managed by the Europeans. Canadians, in the close cooperation with the Chinese. And I think with all the measures we have adopted already this year, we clearly demonstrated that we are not only signing the agreements, but we are implementing them through the binding legislation. And in this case, we are really the only major economy which did it so quickly, and I would say with such a decisiveness, and that's, I think, how we demonstrate the leadership. Concerning the United States, I heard Christiana Figueres, the former UN negotiator, a little bit ironically, but still thanking President Trump for making that controversial statement, because it led to the huge mobilization of the non-state actors, the California and other American states, all the American cities, businesses just re-energized their efforts and stated that despite of the position of the federal government, they want to show that American states, cities and citizens want to contribute to the tackling the climate change. So I believe that in the end we would see the Paris Agreement as a very important milestone which set us on the right trajectory, but it's very important that Europeans would remain in the lead.
If I'm not wrong, the Commission is trying to amend the 2009 gas derivative so that it could apply to offshore import pipelines from third countries. Some say that this is strongly related to Nord Stream 2, and this is more politics than legal issue. Is it both? Is it only politics?
No, it just happened yesterday. We really adopted the amendment to the current gas directive, and what we wanted to achieve by this, and I believe that we accomplished, is that we wanted to bring additional legal certainty and clarity to the question. Because when we've been discussing the regime and functioning of the external pipelines, be it Nord Stream or other pipelines before that, we saw how the lawyers within the institutions, but also in academic circles and in law firms, have been discussing how comprehensively the third energy package is actually covering the external pipelines. So we wanted to remove any doubt, and we have stated very clearly that the EU law fully applies to all EU jurisdiction, including to the external pipelines, bringing the gas to Europe, especially when they are crossing economic zones or territorial waters. And we presented it yesterday. Now we hope that European Parliament and the Council will adopt it in a fast-track procedure, so we can present this amended law, this clarified position, also to the Council, to remove any legal doubts, which I hope that it will help them to accelerate the work on our request for the mandate to negotiate with Russian Federation on the Nord Stream 2 pipeline.
Now two questions about Greece. It seems that the country seems at this point to initiate the establishment of multiple interconnection lines. At the same time, it has reopened the hydrocarbon exploration in order to find potential resources. Do these initiatives match with the Energy Union strategy, with the diversification strategy? Do they match with it?
No, absolutely, and I think Greece will play increasingly important role. I really believe that you can become very important regional player. You can become very important gas hub and a trader in this part of the region, because you have a new, very important, I would say, strategic pipeline coming through your territory, the Trans-Adriatic pipeline, which should bring the Caspian gas to Europe by 2020. And this will be for the first time that we'll have a new gas from the new source coming along the new route into Europe. And then, of course, all the interconnectors which are being promoted, and the most important here I would see IGB, the interconnector between Greece and Bulgaria, would actually link this strategic pipeline to the Eastern Europe, prospectively to the Western Balkans, and I think it would be a totally different situation. On top of it, I know that your country is planning to consider the build-up of another LNG plant in Alexandroupolis, and of course it would depend on how the gas market would evolve. So altogether, with this newly found wealth of gas reserves around Cyprus, which I was told could become second Norway for Eastern Mediterranean, it brings lots of new opportunities for Greece to become very important players. You just need to complete the reforms to create good conditions and improve the infrastructure, and I think that the benefits could be enormous.
I would like to ask you about this. Are you satisfied by the way that Greece is trying to liberalize the gas market and the electricity market? And I'm asking this because they are prior actions or included to all fiscal adjustment programs I have read. They are many years in that.
In my morning introductory remarks, I said that how happy I am as a European, as somebody who comes from Slovakia, to see that Greece is growing again, that jobs are being created, that atmosphere clearly improved, that you feel a lot of positive energy in your country because these very painful reforms are bringing results. And we see the same progress in energy sector. So there are several so-called prior actions to be completed before the end of the third review. And I think what we need is clearly the completion of the reforms in the gas markets, where we would like to see more players, especially in a retail market, where we would like to see that if it comes to such a dominant player like PPC, that they would respect the European Court of Justice ruling and go through the necessary reforms. And I would say overall to adjust the way how the electricity is being produced, distributed and sold on the market to the European norms and standards. Because in that case the Greece electricity and gas market would become compatible with your neighbors. You will be able to establish more links, more trade, more exchanges of energies, and we know that the so-called market coupling bring more competition, better services and better prices for the consumers. And this is what we are trying to accomplish with the Greek government. I believe we will manage that.
And finally, I want your personal opinion, because the talks are going about the reform of the European institutions. A lot of talk has been made and will be made after the State of the Union by Juncker and all the other initiatives. In principles, which do you think will be the role of the new ESM? And if we have a Minister of Finance in the Eurozone, which will be his role? Will it be a decisive one, a key player having a specific role on the budget, or not?
I think that the discussion is a little bit broader, because it's quite obvious that after Brexit, the first thing we had to consolidate and solidify was the unity among EU27. I think that we successfully accomplished that, and therefore also from the Commission's point of view, what is very important to look at all the reforms from the perspective how much we can accomplish together in the format of 27. And I think there is a lot we are going to do. But at the same time, you see that especially like the countries of the Eurozones, or the countries which would like to have the European prosecutor very active in policing cross-border trade, or the use of the EU funds, or structural cooperation in the field of defense, that here most probably we won't have all 27 countries joining that cooperation at the same time. So therefore we will see, I think, different streams of the countries, where the countries will decide where they want to participate, how deeply they want to be integrated. And one of the areas which you rightly pointed out clearly would be the Eurozone, because there everybody feels we need to do more, we need a closer integration. And at this stage I think it's very difficult to predict how fast and how deep we would go, but I think that the balance would be found on the level how precise would be the new rules, how clearly we would be able as a Eurozone to adhere them, and what kind of mechanisms we'll be able to build in, because all these I think would be prerequirements for the member states to consider eventual financial capacity for the Eurozone budget, the position of the European finance ministers and all these things. So I think it will have to go hand in hand. We will come up with our proposals on the 6th of December as a European Commission, and then of course it would be debated, I'm sure, at many occasions among the finance ministers, but this